In the vast chamber of the Galactic Council, light poured through crystal walls that shimmered like frozen starlight. Alien leaders of every kind sat around the circle, their voices calm, their smiles wide, their words soaked in the promise of peace. They spoke of trade routes, treaties, and friendship between worlds, their voices echoing with practiced warmth. But under the surface of their smooth speeches lived a secret no one dared to speak aloud. Humanity's name was never mentioned in those glowing words. When the name of Earth rose in conversation, it came only in whispers, hidden between sentences, spoken with caution as if even sound itself feared to carry it too far. Humanity was not present in the council chamber, yet their shadows stretched across every table, every thought, every nervous glance exchanged by those in power. On the table in the center of the room lay a sealed report, bound in black metal with the crest of the council burned into its surface. None of the smiling delegates dared touch it, though each of them knew exactly what rested inside. The truth sat there like a fire trapped in glass, dangerous and waiting to be freed. It was a record of centuries of deception, a story of betrayal written in official ink, a carefully hidden archive of lies. If the contents of that report ever reached the wrong hands, the galaxy would no longer be able to hold its false peace. Worlds would fracture, empires would fall, and the humans, the very species the Council worked so hard to silence, would rise in fury. The chamber echoed with false laughter as the leaders exchanged stories, but behind every laugh was fear. Their hands moved over documents and trade agreements, yet their eyes flickered again and again toward the black case in the center. They tried to ignore it, tried to pretend it was not there, but the tension in the room betrayed them. The silence between speeches grew heavier each time the case reflected the light. Even the guards stationed along the crystal walls shifted uneasily, their claws tightening on their weapons, their antennae twitching toward the table as if drawn to it by instinct. Among those watching was a young observer, barely more than a student, seated in the higher galleries of the chamber. He had been assigned to learn the ways of diplomacy, to watch the mighty speak and study their behavior. His large eyes darted between the faces of the delegates, and though he did not understand all their words, he understood fear when he saw it. The smiles below were too stiff, the voices too controlled, and the glances too sharp. He saw one delegate's scaled hand tremble when the black case was mentioned, and another's frilled crest collapse slightly in nervous submission. It was not peace that filled this chamber, it was dread wrapped in ceremony. The observer leaned forward, his curiosity rising like fire in his chest. Why was the council afraid of a simple report? He could not hear the whispers clearly, but he caught fragments: earth, betrayal, silence. Each fragment was like a stone dropped into his mind, creating ripples of doubt. He remembered the stories told to the young, that humanity had been reckless, violent, too dangerous to be trusted with full membership in the council. That was why Earth's seat remained empty, why humans were not invited to speak. But what if those stories were lies? What if the sealed report held a truth that the galaxy was never meant to see? As the meeting stretched on, the tension only grew thicker. One of the older delegates, his skin lined with the silver streaks of age, finally spoke with a voice that trembled like an old blade. "We must keep it sealed," he whispered, though his words were not meant for the hall, only for the ears of those closest to him. But in the silence that followed, the words seemed to echo louder than any speech. Keep it sealed. Hide it. Bury it. The observer's heart raced as he saw the way the others nodded, their eyes heavy with guilt. It was not the unity of peace, but the unity of those who share a crime. He saw the council leader, a tall alien whose robes shone with gold thread, press his hands tightly together. His face remained calm for the crowd, but his eyes betrayed him. He looked at the case as though it might open on its own, as though it might explode and scatter their secrets across the galaxy. The young observer realized something powerful at that moment. The humans were not weak. They were not silent because they had no voice. They were silent because the council had stolen it from them. The betrayal had been woven so deep into history that generations now believed it to be truth. And yet, the proof of that theft lay only a few feet away, sealed in black metal. He could not take his eyes off the case. He imagined what it must hold. Did it detail the wars where humans had been abandoned by allies who claimed to support them? Did it describe the stolen colonies, stripped of resources and left to starve while the council profited in silence? Did it record the secret orders, the betrayals carried out in shadow, the false treaties signed with smiles while knives twisted in the dark? Every possibility made his blood run colder, but his curiosity grew stronger still. Below, the voices of the council continued their performance. They praised one another, they planned for the future, they painted a picture of harmony. But it was a painting drawn on cracked glass. The young observer leaned further forward, his hands gripping the railing so tightly his knuckles turned pale. He could see the nervous twitch of the guards, the subtle tremor in the hands of diplomats, the way their words stumbled when the subject of Earth crept too close. All of it was building, moment by moment, towards something inevitable. One day, the truth would escape that sealed case. One day, the humans would know. And when that day came, the smiles in this chamber would vanish. The laughter would die. The golden walls would shake. For centuries, the council had spoken of peace while building their power on lies, but the fire of rage was already smoldering in the shadows. It only waited for a spark. The young observer did not know how soon that spark would come, or how it would spread, but as he stared at the black case in the center of the chamber, he felt the weight of destiny pressing against him. The deception was too heavy to stay buried forever. Sooner or later, the humans would learn. And when they did, the galaxy would tremble with the fury of a species that had been betrayed for too long. The session closed with applause and smiles, the kind that looked perfect to anyone who did not know the truth. Delegates left the chamber one by one, their robes trailing, their symbols shining under the crystal light. But behind every step was fear, and behind every smile was guilt. The guards remained at their posts, their eyes fixed on the case, as though daring it to remain silent. Up in the gallery, the young observer lingered. He did not clap. He did not smile. He simply watched the case, his chest heavy with the knowledge that something terrible and powerful rested inside it. And as the chamber emptied, the silence seemed to whisper a promise that chilled him to his core. The truth will not remain hidden forever. In the cold silence of the council's archives, deep beneath the shining halls where leaders gave their speeches, a shadow moved. The chamber was not open to the public, and only a few chosen officials were allowed to enter. Yet that night, footsteps echoed softly between the towering shelves of records. A figure in plain robes paused before a door locked with 3 seals of authority, a door no ordinary being was meant to touch. Behind it waited the black case, now hidden from the eyes of the chamber. The council had ordered it sealed away after the last meeting, hoping the truth would remain buried. But secrets never rest forever. The intruder's hand trembled as it pressed against the glowing pad. The lock resisted, but stolen codes whispered through the circuits, and one by one the seals faded. A hiss of air slipped through the cracks as the door slid open, revealing the chamber within. There it was, the black case, resting on a pedestal, surrounded by faint light. The intruder stepped closer, heart hammering, aware that discovery meant death. Yet the need to know was stronger than fear. With one final breath, they placed their hand on the cold surface of the case. It responded to the stolen codes and opened with a low hiss, like a serpent releasing its breath. Inside lay a set of crystalline tablets, glowing faintly as if alive. The intruder lifted the first one, and the room filled with soft light. Words etched in alien script appeared, and as the intruder read, the truth unfolded like a blade sliding free of its sheath. The council had betrayed humanity from the very beginning. The first records told of Earth's first contact, a century earlier. At that time, humans had offered alliance and knowledge, eager to stand among the stars as equals. But the council had seen something different. They saw not partners, but a threat. Humans were too resilient, too adaptable, too fierce when cornered. The council feared that if Earth was allowed to grow freely, no empire could contain them. So they began to weave their lies. One report detailed how colonies that should have been aided were instead abandoned to starvation. Another described how human fleets, promised reinforcements during wars against raiders, were left to fight alone. Thousands died while the council whispered excuses and blamed miscommunication. Yet the truth was clear. Every abandonment, every delay, every silence was deliberate. The Council was bleeding humanity slowly, weakening them while smiling in public. The intruders' hands shook as they turned to the next record. It described secret deals, the theft of human technology, quietly sold to other species as shared Council advancement. It spoke of human trade routes sabotaged, of resources stolen under false agreements. One page held an order signed by multiple Council leaders: suppress Earth's influence, contain their growth. They must never reach dominance. The intruders' chest tightened as they realized the scale of the crime. This was not politics. This was not oversight. It was a long, Cold War fought in silence, a war that humanity had never even known was being waged against them. The Council had not simply lied. They had shaped the galaxy's perception of humanity with careful stories, painting them as reckless, dangerous, unworthy of trust. Every world believed those stories now, never questioning the source. As the intruder placed the last tablet back in the case, their heart burned. They knew this knowledge could not remain hidden. But how could it be revealed? The Council would kill to keep it sealed. Even now, alarms might already be waking. The intruder closed the case, but in their haste, a small crack appeared on one of the crystals. A thin beam of light escaped, hitting the floor like a fallen star. It was a mistake, one that could not be undone. In the galleries above, the young observer from before lay restless in his quarters. He had seen the fear in the Council's eyes during the meeting, and the memory haunted him. Now, as he looked out at the stars, he felt something shift. The galaxy's silence was cracking. Whispers moved faster than light, carried on trade ships, spoken in quiet rooms. He overheard merchants mutter about human ships appearing in places they had no right to be. Traders claimed Earth's fleets were stirring again, though the Council denied it. Rumors grew with every passing day. Meanwhile, on Earth, leaders received fragments of data smuggled from the shadows. The stolen file had been copied, despite the intruders' fears. It arrived broken, incomplete, yet enough to spark the flames. Human officials sat in silence as the words scrolled before them. Betrayals, lies, crimes committed by those who had sworn peace. Fury grew in their eyes, and for the first time in centuries, their voices rose as one. They remembered the battles where allies had never come. They remembered the lost colonies, the abandoned fleets, the lies told to grieving families. And now, with proof in their hands, their anger transformed into something sharper: resolve. Plans were drawn in secret, engines awakened, and war rooms lit with maps of the stars. Humanity would not remain silent any longer. Back in the Council chamber, the leaders argued in panic. The crack in the crystal tablet had been discovered, the breach confirmed. They knew someone had seen too much, and worse, they feared humans already had the knowledge. Their voices grew louder, claws striking tables, wings fluttering with agitation. Some demanded harsher control, others whispered of negotiations, but all of them shared the same fear. If the truth spread fully, if humanity learned everything, there would be no stopping what came next. The young observer sat again in the gallery, watching the arguments unfold. His eyes scanned the chamber, and he saw it clearly now. These were not leaders of peace. These were conspirators bound by fear. The black case had been moved once more, locked deeper in the archives, but it no longer mattered. The truth had already slipped beyond their control. He leaned back in his seat, heart heavy with the knowledge that the galaxy was on the edge of something vast. The humans were awakening, and the Council knew it. Across the stars, shadows moved, silent ships, quiet fleets, engines that had slept for decades now roaring back to life. The betrayal was no longer hidden. Humanity's rage was beginning to stir, and soon, the Council's lies would burn beneath the fire of vengeance. The young observer whispered to himself, almost in fear, "The storm has already begun." The night sky above Earth was no longer silent. Hidden deep beneath oceans, within hollowed mountains, and across secret bases on the Moon and Mars, humanity's great war machines stirred. For years, they had been silent, their reactors sleeping, their hulls sealed in darkness. But now, engines hummed again. The old fleets, forgotten by the galaxy, were awakening, and with them came the storm that had been waiting for centuries. Humans did not shout, did not announce themselves. They moved in silence, as predators do when the hunt begins. In orbit, massive shapes drifted from the shadows, their surfaces dark to avoid detection. These ships were not new. They were ancient designs refined through war and desperation. They were built to endure, built to fight without mercy. Their black steel hulls reflected no light, their weapons hidden beneath armored plates until the moment of need. As they rose above Earth, one by one, their systems came alive. Thousands of humans watched from the ground as faint glimmers of light moved across the sky, like stars in motion. Many wept, for they knew the truth now. The Council's betrayal had been real. Their grief turned to fire, and that fire would soon burn across the stars. Inside one of these colossal vessels, officers walked the steel corridors in silence. Their faces were grim, their voices quiet. Orders were passed without speeches. There was no need to stir the crews with words. They had already seen the files. They had read of abandoned colonies, of soldiers left to die, of children stolen into slavery while the Council pretended ignorance. Every man and woman aboard these ships carried that pain like iron in their hearts. Now, with every switch turned, with every reactor engaged, that pain became purpose. Meanwhile, far from Earth, alien traders whispered of sightings. Merchant convoys spoke of vast shadows gliding past their routes. Some described hearing strange signals on open frequencies, low, pulsing rhythms that sent chills through their crews. It is the humans, they whispered in fear, though no proof had yet been seen. Council officials dismissed it as superstition, telling the galaxy that humanity had no such fleets. But the rumors spread faster than denial, feeding the growing sense of dread. In the Council chamber, panic was carefully hidden behind polished speeches. Delegates assured one another that humanity remained weak, divided, too small to threaten the great powers. But beneath their words, their claws tapped nervously against the tables. They had seen the breach in their archives. They knew the files had slipped beyond their control. They could not know how much humanity had learned, but the thought alone gnawed at them like rot in their bones. The young observer, seated once again in the gallery above, listened carefully. He saw through their lies more clearly than ever. They pretended calm, but their eyes betrayed fear. He remembered the trembling hands when the black case was revealed, the nervous silence, the whispered promises to keep the truth sealed. Now, their words rang hollow. He leaned forward, his heart racing, as he watched the storm gather not outside the chamber but within it. He thought of Earth, though he had never seen it, and he wondered if the humans already knew the full truth. If they did, what would they do? The answer came sooner than anyone expected. On the far edge of the galaxy, in a system long thought abandoned, a Council patrol fleet vanished. At first, it was dismissed as pirates, a common excuse. But then another fleet disappeared. And another. In less than a cycle, 3 fleets were gone without a trace. Survivors from one crippled vessel crawled back to a Council world, their voices shaking. They spoke of ships larger than anything they had ever seen, moving with terrifying speed and precision. They spoke of weapons that cut through shields like air. And they swore they had seen the banners of Earth painted on those ships before the void consumed them. The Council tried to silence these stories, calling them madness, lies, fabrications. But silence could not erase the wreckage. Debris floated in space, scorched with human designs. Black steel twisted and burned, yet undeniable. The galaxy's whispers turned into fear. If humanity truly had fleets like this, then the old stories were true. The predators had only been sleeping, and now they were awake. Back on Earth, leaders gathered in a hidden chamber lit by holographic stars. Around them hung the faces of generals, admirals, and commanders who had sworn to serve the people, not the Council. They did not speak of negotiation, nor of apology. They spoke only of strategy. Quietly, methodically, they traced the maps of Council territories, marking weak points, noting supply lines. They had waited centuries for this moment. Now the time had come to move. One admiral stood tall, his voice like iron. They wanted us weak. They lied, betrayed, and left us to die. But we survived. That is our strength. We endured their silence, and now we will answer with fire. His words were not shouted, but they carried the weight of every lost life, every abandoned world, every betrayal carved into history. The room fell silent as his final words echoed, "No more silence. Let the council hear us in their bones." The fleets departed soon after. They did not announce themselves. They did not issue warnings. They simply moved, shadows gliding through the stars. For every betrayal recorded in the stolen files, a target was marked. For every life taken by council lies, a strike was planned. Humanity's rage did not come as a roar. It came as silence before the storm, as steel wings spreading in the dark. In the council chamber, the leaders laughed nervously at their own speeches, but the young observer felt the shift in the air. He could almost hear it, the hum of engines far away, the drumbeat of war carried through the void. His eyes turned upward to the stars beyond the crystal walls, and for the first time, he understood the weight of what was coming. The humans were no longer waiting. They were moving, and when they arrived, the galaxy would know the meaning of fury born from centuries of silence. The Galactic Council chamber had never felt so fragile. The great walls of crystal still glimmered with light, the banners of unity still hung from the tall arches, and the polished floor still reflected the golden robes of leaders. But beneath all that shine was the trembling of a house built on sand. Whispers spread faster than speeches, and though the council tried to mask its fear with calm words, the cracks in their facade grew wider each day. Reports of vanished fleets could no longer be dismissed as accidents. Too many ships were gone. Too many witnesses spoke the same words. Humanity was awake. In private halls and shadowed corridors, alien merchants argued in hushed voices. Traders told each other of massive vessels moving through dark sectors of space, black silhouettes that swallowed light. Pilots swore they had felt the vibrations of engines that shook the void, engines stronger than anything the council had ever displayed. Some spoke of hearing strange signals carried on comm waves, deep rhythmic pulses that echoed like a heartbeat across the stars. They claimed these were human fleets moving silently, marking their presence not with words but with sound. Most who heard the stories shuddered and prayed they would never meet those ships face to face. Inside the chamber, the council leader stood tall, his golden robes shining under the crystal light. His voice rang with practiced authority as he spoke to the gathered delegates. "These are only rumors, nothing more. Do not allow yourselves to be swayed by the fear of shadows." His hands moved smoothly, his gestures grand, but his eyes betrayed him. They flickered too often to the sealed doors of the archives, where the black case still lay hidden. He knew, as did the others, that the truth was no longer in their control. The lies they had sown were unraveling, strand by strand. Another delegate, with scales glimmering like glass, slammed his claws against the table. "Rumors? You dare call this rumor? I lost a cousin in the patrol fleet at Arik's Gate. They were torn apart. Survivors returned half dead, swearing the humans destroyed them without hesitation. Tell me, council leader, is my cousin's blood also a rumor?" His voice cut through the chamber like a blade, and silence fell heavy after it. No one answered. No one could. The young observer sat again in the gallery, watching the exchange with wide eyes. He could see the fear spreading now, not just in whispers but in the open. The unity of the council was breaking apart. Each delegate defended their own people, their own fleets, no longer speaking of the galaxy as one. He leaned forward, fascinated, as their voices rose. One alien with feathered wings spread them wide, her voice sharp. "We must strike Earth at once. Before their fleets grow stronger, before their rage spreads further. Crush them now, or we will all suffer." Another, his skin pale and ridged like carved stone, shook his head fiercely. "Strike them? Have you learned nothing from history? Humanity survives everything thrown at them. Every trap, every ambush. If we attack first, we invite our own destruction." The chamber broke into chaos, voices colliding, claws and wings gesturing wildly. Some demanded silence, others screamed for war, and still others begged for diplomacy. The council leader raised his hands for calm, but the chamber no longer obeyed him. The illusion of control had been shattered. Outside the chamber, the whispers grew louder among the common people of the galaxy. In marketplaces, in ports, in starship cantinas, beings of every species whispered the same words. The humans are coming. Some feared them, remembering tales of Earth's soldiers fighting with unmatched ferocity. Others admired them in secret, hoping perhaps humanity would finally break the Council's hold. The stories spread like fire, each retelling adding more detail. Colossal warships, unstoppable weapons, fleets moving with silence and precision. Back in the Council archives, guards stood watch over the sealed case. They did not speak of it, but their antennae twitched and their tails lashed in unease. They too had heard the rumors, and some of them wondered if the humans already possessed the full contents of the case. If they did, then nothing the Council said or did would matter. Humanity's rage had been building for centuries, and now it was ready to be unleashed. The young observer could feel it in the air. He sat in the gallery, his hands gripping the rail, his breath short. He thought of Earth, of a world he had never seen but whose name now carried the weight of doom. The Council's deception was crumbling, and with it the balance of the galaxy. For the first time, he felt pity for the leaders below. They had built their power on lies, and now those lies were consuming them. The session ended with no decision, no plan, only louder voices and deeper divisions. Delegates left in silence, their eyes dark, their claws restless. The Council leader lingered at the table, staring at his reflection in the polished surface, his hands shaking though he forced them still. The chamber emptied, but the echoes of fear remained. The young observer stayed seated long after the hall was quiet. His thoughts were heavy, his chest tight. He knew the truth now. The galaxy was standing at the edge of something vast, and no speech, no treaty, no false promise could stop it. Humanity had been silent for too long. Now their silence was breaking, and their rage would soon sweep across the stars. The chamber of the Galactic Council was packed tighter than ever before. Delegates crowded their seats, voices hushed yet sharp, like knives waiting to strike. Rumors of vanished fleets and human warships moving in the dark had grown too loud to ignore. Every species sent its highest leaders, their robes gleaming, their faces stiff with false calm. Guards lined the crystal walls, weapons drawn and ready, though even they shifted uneasily, their eyes darting toward the sealed doors of the archives. The air itself seemed heavy, charged with something unseen, as if the stars outside were holding their breath. The Council leader rose, his golden robes shining under the crystal lights. He spread his hands, his voice smooth and commanding. Let us not be ruled by whispers. Let us remember unity. Humanity cannot stand against the galaxy. We are stronger, we are countless, and his words froze. The sound of boots echoed through the chamber. It was not the soft steps of attendants or guards. It was heavy, deliberate, the march of soldiers who did not bow to anyone in that room. The massive doors opened. For the first time in centuries, humans entered the council chamber. They walked in silence, a small delegation in dark uniforms, their boots striking the polished floor in perfect rhythm. Their faces were carved from stone, their eyes cold, their shoulders straight. No fear, no hesitation, only purpose. The chamber fell into stunned silence as every alien turned to stare. For years, humans had been spoken of as reckless, dangerous, even primitive. Yet here they stood, calm and unshaken, their presence heavier than any speech the council could give. At the front of the human delegation, an officer carried something in his hands. It was the black case, the very same that had sat on the council's table, sealed away in their archives. Gasps rippled through the chamber as the humans carried it forward and placed it on the central table. The sound of metal meeting stone echoed like thunder, louder than any shout. No one spoke. No one moved. The leading human stepped forward, his voice low but strong enough to fill the chamber. "We found your lies," he said. He did not shout, yet the words cut through the silence like a blade. His hand moved over the case, and with a soft hiss, it opened. Light spilled across the chamber as the crystalline tablets rose into the air, their etched words glowing for all to see. Delegates leaned forward, their eyes wide with fear. There was no denying it now. The records floated above the table, projecting images of betrayal, orders signed in secret, reports of abandoned fleets, stolen colonies, false treaties. Every crime the Council had buried was now revealed in the heart of its own chamber. The lies that had shaped the galaxy for centuries shone before every eye, undeniable, unstoppable. The silence was broken by a delegate's trembling voice. This cannot be. But even as he spoke, his crest lowered, his eyes dimmed. He knew it was true. They all did. The humans stood in silence, watching. They did not need to defend themselves. The evidence spoke louder than any words. Another delegate, feathers quivering, slammed her winged hand on the table. If this is true, then the Council has committed crimes against an entire species. Her voice shook, not with anger for the humans, but with fear for what would come next. The Council leader tried to recover, his voice desperate. This chamber is for unity. Humanity, he stopped when the human officer raised his hand, silencing him. The human's eyes swept across the room, cold and unblinking. Unity, he said. You call betrayal unity? You call abandonment peace? You left our soldiers to die. You stole our worlds. You poisoned the galaxy with lies. That is not unity. That is fear. Every word struck the chamber like a hammer. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding the human's gaze, others trembling under it. The young observer in the gallery leaned forward, his heart pounding. He had dreamed of this moment since he first saw the black case, but now that it was happening, it was even heavier than he imagined. The truth was not just whispered anymore. It was being forced into the light. The humans closed the case and stepped back, but their presence lingered like a storm. You will answer for this, the officer said simply. Then, without waiting for reply, the human delegation turned and walked from the chamber. Their boots struck the floor with the same steady rhythm, echoing long after the doors shut behind them. The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted, wings flared, claws struck the table. Some cried for war, others for surrender, and many simply fell silent in shock. The council leader sat frozen in his chair, his golden robes heavy, his authority shattered. The young observer saw it clearly. The council's lies had been broken open, their power crumbling. Humanity had not come to beg, nor to plead. They had come to show the truth, and then they left, leaving the galaxy to drown in its own fear. Outside, unseen by those still shouting within the chamber, human fleets moved quietly through the stars, their engines burning bright. The truth had been revealed. The rage was only beginning. The galaxy shook as the news spread. From one world to the next, the story carried itself faster than any official message the council could control. Humans had entered the council chamber. Humans had revealed the lies. The case, the files, the betrayals, all of it was no longer rumor, no longer whispered in secret. It was truth, undeniable, and every being in the galaxy now knew it. Panic spread like fire in dry grass. Some worlds demanded answers from their leaders, others rioted in the streets, and still others looked toward the stars with dread, wondering when the human fleets would arrive. Inside the council chamber, fear turned to anger. Delegates screamed at one another, their unity shattered. "Strike them now," shouted one with feathered wings. "We cannot let their rage spread. Crush Earth before it becomes unstoppable." Another slammed his claw against the table. "Fool! You do not crush humanity. You only feed their fury. Every time they are cornered, they rise stronger. If you strike first, you doom us all." But the council leader had already made his choice. His golden robes were dimmed with sweat, his voice louder than ever but shaking underneath. "If we show weakness, they will consume us. Assemble the fleets. Gather every ship, every soldier. We will march on Earth and end this before it begins." His words echoed through the chamber, and though many argued, the order was sealed. Across the galaxy, massive fleets were summoned, banners of a dozen species flying together, united not by peace but by fear. At the edges of human space, the first wave of the Council's fleet gathered. Colossal carriers, destroyers, and swarms of fighters filled the void, blotting out the stars. Their commanders looked uneasy, their voices tight with doubt, but they obeyed orders. They had been told humans were dangerous, but still weak compared to the combined might of the galaxy. Their mission was to intimidate, to overwhelm, to remind Earth of its place. The fleet advanced. On Earth, sirens sounded. In hidden bunkers and war rooms, human commanders watched the approaching swarm. Their faces were calm, their voices steady. They had expected this. The Council could not allow the truth to live without attempting to crush it. But humanity was no longer the cornered prey of centuries past. They had built, they had endured, they had sharpened their steel in silence. Now the trap was ready. From the darkness beyond Earth's orbit, the first human warships emerged. Their hulls were black, their weapons hidden until they unfolded like blades in the night. Engines glowed faintly, controlled and precise. There were fewer ships than the Council expected, far fewer than the endless fleets sent against them. The alien commanders laughed at first, their confidence restored. "This is their strength," one sneered. "This handful of relics? We will scatter them like dust." But then the battle began. The first volley came not from human guns, but from silence itself. A sudden pulse cut through the void, jamming Council communications. The fleet stumbled, their formations collapsing as orders vanished into static. Before confusion could fade, the human warships moved. They cut through the darkness with speed no one thought possible, striking with precision. Beams of light sliced through alien shields as if they were paper. Missiles detonated with such force that entire squadrons vanished in fire. The Council's ships returned fire, filling the void with plasma and burning energy, but the humans moved like shadows, slipping between shots, their armor shrugging off glancing blows. Their fleets did not scatter, they did not hesitate. They moved as one, every ship flowing with the same deadly rhythm. The Council had numbers, but the humans had something greater. Unity forged in betrayal, rage sharpened into discipline. The young observer, still far away in the galleries of the Council chamber, heard the first reports arrive. His heart pounded as voices shouted the truth. "The fleet at Sol is breaking. Their weapons cut through us. We cannot hold them." Each cry was more desperate than the last. He closed his eyes and imagined the scene, the vast armada of the Council crumbling under the precise fury of Earth's defenders. Back in the battlefield, a Council flagship burned. Its commander, scales charred and claws trembling, gasped as human warships closed in. He tried to issue orders, but static swallowed his words. Before he could finish, his screen filled with the cold image of a human ship looming over his dying vessel. No words came from the humans. No taunts, no threats. Only silence as their guns fired, ending the battle in a flash of fire. Across the system, chaos spread. Council fleets tried to regroup, but every attempt collapsed under human strikes. Smaller ships were hunted down with ruthless efficiency, while larger carriers were crippled before they could even launch reinforcements. Hours passed, and by the end, the stars around Earth burned with wreckage. The Council's great armada, sent to intimidate, had been shattered. On Earth, humans did not cheer. They stood in silence, their faces hard, their resolve unshaken. This was not victory to them. This was justice, the first answer to centuries of lies. Their rage had only just begun, and the Council now knew it. In the chamber, the Council leader slumped in his seat, his golden robes heavy, his face pale. The delegates shouted, panicked, demanded new plans, but he heard none of it. His mind was filled only with the truth. The Council had made its move, and it had failed. Humanity was no longer the outcast they could silence. They were the storm, and it had already broken loose. The young observer leaned forward, his hands trembling. He whispered words no one else could hear. "The Council has awakened something they cannot control." He felt a chill race down his spine. The first battle had been fought, and the galaxy would never be the same. News of the Council's defeat at Earth spread faster than light, carried by fleeing ships, broken signals, and the wreckage that drifted through space. Whole star systems whispered of what had happened. An armada, the largest force the Council had ever assembled, shattered in a single battle. Merchants repeated the story in trembling voices, Soldiers whispered it to each other in their barracks, and common people asked the same question again and again. If the Council cannot defeat humanity, who can? On distant colonies, Council propaganda blared across holoscreens, insisting the battle had been a minor setback, that reinforcements were on their way, that humanity would soon be crushed. But behind those polished lies, commanders wrote desperate reports, begging for aid, begging for plans, begging for hope. None came. They all knew the truth. Humanity's rage was now moving across the stars. It began with silence. Convoys carrying supplies to Council fleets vanished without a trace. Traders who had mocked Earth once now disappeared in the dark. Their ships later found drifting. Their cargo holds emptied with surgical precision. Small outposts on the edge of human space stopped sending messages. When rescue fleets were dispatched, they found only burning wreckage, and the mark of Earth's banners carved into steel. Humanity was not merely defending their world. They were striking back. Entire sectors felt the weight of the storm. At Arrak's gate, human ships appeared out of nothing, their hulls black and silent. They destroyed the fortress in minutes, its weapons cut down before they could even fire. At the trade hub of Vena Prime, hundreds watched as human warships drifted into orbit, hung in silence, and then left without firing a shot, only to annihilate the Council fleet sent to intercept them. Panic spread as worlds realized that humans chose their battles with cold precision, always striking where it hurt most. Inside the Council chamber, fear turned into madness. Delegates shouted until their voices cracked, some demanding unconditional surrender, others screaming for vengeance. "We must beg for peace," one cried, his feathered crest trembling. "We must send everything we have," another roared, slamming his claws against the table. The chamber had once been a place of calm speeches and polished lies, but now it was chaos, filled with the voices of leaders who had lost control of the galaxy. The young observer sat in the gallery above, his chest heavy as he listened. The leaders no longer looked like rulers of empires. They looked like frightened children trapped in a storm they had created themselves. He remembered the humans walking into this chamber, their silence heavier than words, their eyes filled with rage. Now that rage was spreading, and the Council could not stop it. Across the stars, alien citizens whispered of rebellion. If the Council could be deceivers, if they could lie about humanity for centuries, what else had they lied about? Whole worlds began to question their loyalty, their trust crumbling like dust in the wind. Some even prayed in secret for humanity's victory, hoping that when the storm ended, the Council's chains would finally be broken. In space, the storm raged on. Human fleets did not move like ordinary armadas. They appeared without warning, struck with perfect precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. They left behind wreckage, silence, and fear. Council commanders tried to predict their movements, but no strategy could hold against such disciplined fury. One admiral, watching helplessly as his fleet was torn apart, whispered the words that soon echoed across the galaxy. "They fight as one mind. We are fighting an army, but they are fighting as a single soul." Every day brought new reports. Supply lines cut. Strongholds destroyed. Fleets burned. The Council's power, once thought unshakable, crumbled piece by piece. The delegates screamed at each other, blaming one another, clawing at old grudges, but none of it mattered. The galaxy no longer looked at them as leaders. They looked at them as liars who had been caught, liars who were now paying the price. The young observer leaned back in his seat, his breath shallow. He could feel it now, the weight of history pressing against him. Humanity's rage was not just revenge. It was justice, sharpened into steel, carried on the engines of their ships. Every strike was a reminder that lies could not bury the truth forever. And yet, he also knew this was only the beginning. The Council had lost fleets, lost control, lost trust, but humanity was not finished. Their silence had been broken, and their fury was only growing. The galaxy trembled with each passing day, waiting for the next strike, the next message, the next moment when the humans would appear from the shadows and remind everyone of the price of betrayal. The storm was spreading, and nothing could stop it now. The Council chamber no longer shone with the same light it once held. The crystal walls still glittered, The banners still hung high, but the air inside was heavy with dread. Delegates sat slumped in their seats, their faces drawn with exhaustion. The great empires of the galaxy had gathered here to display unity, but what remained now was only fear, suspicion, and desperation. The sound of voices filled the hall, not calm speeches, but frantic arguments that echoed like thunder. "We must surrender," cried a delegate with trembling wings. "Every day we lose more fleets. Every day, more of our people die. If we kneel now, perhaps the humans will spare us." His words drew gasps, but also nods. Many in the chamber had already thought the same. They knew their fleets could not stand against Earth's silent warships, and their citizens were demanding answers. Across the table, a scaled delegate struck the surface with his claw so hard the sound cracked through the noise. "Surrender? Do you think humanity will forgive us? After centuries of betrayal? After the lies we carved into their history? They will not spare us. They will burn us until nothing remains. The only chance we have is to unite, to fight, to throw everything we have into one final stand." His voice shook with rage, but beneath it was fear. He knew the truth. His words were not strength, but denial. The chamber erupted in chaos again. Some demanded surrender, others demanded war. Accusations flew across the room. One leader shouted that his fleets had been sacrificed to protect another's border. Another hissed that his colonies had been abandoned while others received protection. The unity of the council, once their greatest strength, was now nothing but shards of broken trust. The council leader, his golden robes dull and heavy, tried to silence them. His voice was tired, his authority cracked. "Listen. If we are divided, we are already dead. Humanity moves as one mind, one will. If we scatter, if we betray one another, they will pick us apart like carrion. We must decide, together, our course." But even as he spoke, delegates rose from their seats and stormed out, their banners trailing behind them. Entire empires no longer wished to stand with the council. Some leaders whispered of making separate deals with humanity, offering surrender in exchange for survival. Others swore they would never bow, even if it meant extinction. The chamber, once the heart of galactic unity, was splitting apart before the young observer's eyes. High above, the young observer leaned against the rail, his heart pounding. He could see it clearly. The council was finished. Humanity had not just broken their fleets. They had broken their lies, their unity, their very identity. Now every species fought not against Earth, but against their own fear. He whispered to himself, his voice trembling, "They are not losing to weapons, they are losing to truth." Beyond the chamber, the galaxy itself reflected the chaos. On distant worlds, riots shook the streets. Citizens demanded answers from their leaders, demanding to know why they had been lied to for centuries. In some cities, crowds tore down the banners of the council, burning them in the squares. On others, people painted human symbols on their walls, calling for Earth to bring justice. The very foundation of the council's power was collapsing, not from outside invasion, but from within. Meanwhile, in the shadows of space, humanity's fleets continued their campaign. They did not roar with victory. They did not boast. They moved in silence, striking with precision. One by one, council strongholds crumbled. With every battle lost, more worlds whispered the same words: "The humans are coming. The council cannot save us." In desperation, the council leader gathered the remaining delegates in secret chambers. His voice was quiet, broken, but determined. "We have only one chance. We must form a final alliance. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. If we do not stand together, humanity will sweep across the stars, and none of us will remain." His eyes, once proud, now burned with desperation. This is not about survival of power. This is about survival itself. The young observer watched from the shadows as these words were spoken, and he felt a shiver run through him. A final stand. A desperate alliance forged not from trust, but from fear. He knew it would not hold. The cracks were too deep, the wounds too old. But he also knew humanity would not wait. They had shown the truth, They had struck their first blows, and they would not stop until their vengeance was complete. The chamber fell into silence as the leaders gave their reluctant nods. The alliance was agreed upon. Ships would be gathered, fleets assembled, soldiers marched into the void. The galaxy's greatest armada would rise once again, this time not against raiders, not against pirates, but against humanity itself. But in the quiet of his heart, the young observer knew the truth. It would not be enough. Humanity had waited too long, suffered too much. Their rage was not the rage of one battle, but of centuries. No fleet, no alliance, no desperate plan could stop what was coming. The storm was almost at their doors.